Right now, as you're watching this, the ground beneath 87,767 people is still trembling. The latest AI analysis reveals something that's sending shockwaves through the geological community. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. A mega-tsunami capable of wiping out entire coastlines could be building beneath the Philippine Trench, and no one knows when it will strike. October 10th, 2025, 12:11 p.m. local time. The earth beneath eastern Mindanao didn't just shake, it exploded. A massive magnitude 7.4 earthquake ripped through the Philippine Trench with the force of 150 atomic bombs, followed minutes later by a second devastating blow. A magnitude 6.8 quake that struck the same fault system. This wasn't just an earthquake. It was a doublet sequence. Two massive ruptures in rapid succession. Something so rare that scientists record fewer than a handful globally each century. The destruction was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The entire province of Davao Oriental, home to nearly 500,000 people, was plunged into complete darkness as power grids collapsed. Within 30 seconds, nearly 40,000 homes were damaged or destroyed across multiple provinces. The ground itself moved 15 feet. That's 4.6 meters of pure tectonic violence, shifting the Earth's crust in a single catastrophic moment. But the numbers only tell part of the story. This earthquake was felt over 620 miles away, from the epicenter in Mindanao all the way to Luzon's Bicol region. That's the equivalent of an earthquake in Los Angeles being felt in Seattle. Emergency sirens wailed across 7 provinces as tsunami warnings echoed through coastal communities. Families grabbed nothing but the clothes on their backs and ran for higher ground, not knowing if the ocean was about to follow them inland. As rescue teams race against time to pull survivors from collapsed buildings, a more terrifying reality is emerging. AI-driven seismic analysis suggests this doublet sequence isn't an isolated event. It's a warning. The Philippine Trench, one of the world's most volatile fault systems, may be building towards something far worse. But what's happening beneath the surface is even more alarming. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, tectonic forces beyond human comprehension are at war. The Philippine Sea Plate is diving beneath the Philippine Mobile Belt at the Philippine Trench, a subduction zone capable of generating earthquakes up to magnitude 9.0. What happened on October 10th was the violent release of stress that had been building for decades, but it may have done something far more dangerous, loaded even more pressure onto nearby fault segments. The first earthquake ruptured along a massive fault plane, 56 miles long by 34 miles wide. The rupture lasted just over 30 seconds, but in that brief window, the seafloor lurched upward with enough force to displace billions of gallons of seawater. Peak slip measurements show the fault moved 15.27 feet near the hypocenter. That's enough vertical displacement to lift a 3-story building straight into the air. But here's what's truly terrifying. The second earthquake, that magnitude 6.8 event, wasn't random. Advanced modeling reveals it was directly triggered by stress transfer from the first rupture. The initial quake literally pushed the fault system past its breaking point in a different location. This is called stress loading, and it's still happening right now along hundreds of miles of the Philippine Trench. Satellite data shows the seafloor is still adjusting, still settling from the massive displacement. Thermal sensors detect elevated temperatures along the fault zone where friction generated enormous heat during the rupture. GPS stations across the region recorded permanent ground displacement. The landscape itself has been permanently altered. The Philippine Trench system has awakened, and scientists fear this doublet sequence is just the beginning. The most chilling discovery comes from AI analysis of historical earthquake patterns. Machine learning algorithms trained on decades of seismic data are detecting stress accumulation signatures that match conditions before some of the world's most devastating megathrust earthquakes. The same patterns that preceded the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the 2011 Japan disaster are emerging along the Philippine Trench. But numbers don't capture what this means for the people living in the shadow of this threat. Maria Santos was sleeping in her home in Baganga when the world ended around her. "The ground was shaking so violently I thought the world was ending," she recalls. "Our house just crumbled around us." Maria is one of 87,767 people, mothers, children, elderly grandparents who have been displaced from their homes, many with nothing but the clothes they were wearing when the earthquake struck. In evacuation centers across Mindanao, families are crammed into spaces designed for half their number. These facilities are operating at 120% capacity, with 38,012 people packed into shelters meant for far fewer. Children sleep on concrete floors. Elderly residents struggle without proper medical care. Sanitation systems are overwhelmed. Every aftershock, at Quakes, and there have been thousands, sends these traumatized survivors into renewed panic. 10 people are confirmed dead, but that number tells only part of the human cost. Over 1,027 people required hospital treatment, many suffering crush injuries and fractures from collapsing structures. In the mining village of Gumayan, 3 workers were killed in a landslide that buried them alive. Cardiac-related deaths, heart attacks triggered by the sheer terror of the event, claimed 2 more lives. But it's the survivors who paint the most haunting picture. "I saw my neighbor crushed by a wall," says a resident of Métis City. "I couldn't help him." Another survivor from Baganga describes the moment of impact. "When I looked up, half the houses were gone." These aren't statistics. These are real people whose lives were shattered in 30 seconds of geological violence. Elena Rodriguez, a resident of Davao City, captures the ongoing trauma. "The aftershocks are terrifying. Every time the ground shakes, we relive the trauma. Thousands of aftershocks continue to terrorize survivors, each one a reminder that the earth beneath their feet is still unstable, still dangerous. And for those hoping this will simply calm down, the experts have bad news. The scientists monitoring the Philippine Trench are choosing their words carefully, but their concern is unmistakable." Dr. Emily Carter, a geophysicist analyzing the seismic data, delivered a chilling assessment. The AI analysis is concerning. It suggests that the potential for a megathrust earthquake is real, and we need to be prepared. PHIVOLCS, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, confirmed what many feared. The sequence suggests complex interaction of tectonic plates in the region. The possibility of another M7 earthquake and large aftershocks still remains. This isn't scientific caution. This is a warning. International seismologists are equally alarmed. "This doublet is a clear sign of stress release on the Philippine Trench," one expert explained. "The next big rupture could be even larger." The USGS analysis revealed the terrifying scope of what occurred. Their finite fault models show the massive slip that carved through the seafloor, and their stress transfer calculations reveal how the first earthquake loaded pressure onto surrounding fault segments. One researcher called the readings unprecedented, a word scientists don't use lightly. When geologists start using terms like unprecedented, it means they're seeing patterns in the data that haven't been observed before. Patterns that suggest the fault system is behaving in new and potentially more dangerous ways. The most unsettling aspect of expert assessments is what they're not saying. Behind closed doors, scientists are running models of worst-case scenarios. Magnitude 8.5 to 9.0 earthquakes capable of generating tsunamis over 33 feet high. They're quietly discussing evacuation protocols and updating hazard maps. When experts won't discuss their worst fears publicly, that silence speaks volumes. Because the data shows this situation is getting worse, not better. The Philippine Trench isn't calming down. It's accelerating towards something far more catastrophic. What began as isolated seismic activity has exploded into a crisis that's intensifying with each passing day. The pattern emerging from the data is one that has geologists worldwide watching with growing alarm. It started with background tremors that barely registered on sensitive instruments. Then came the precursor events, smaller earthquakes that should have been warnings, but went largely unnoticed. October 10th shattered that false calm with the devastating doublet sequence. But instead of releasing pressure, these massive ruptures seem to have destabilized the entire fault system. Since the initial disaster, thousands of aftershocks have rattled the region. Many of these aren't the gentle settling that scientists hope for. They're powerful events in the magnitude 4.0 to 5.0 range, each one capable of bringing down structures already weakened by the main earthquakes. The frequency isn't decreasing. If anything, the aftershock sequence is showing signs of sustained activity that suggests the fault system remains under enormous stress. Most troubling is the geographic spread of the activity. What started as localized ruptures along a specific segment of the Philippine Trench is now showing signs of stress migration along hundreds of miles of the fault zone. GPS stations are detecting ongoing ground displacement. The Earth is still moving, still adjusting to the massive forces unleashed on October 10th. The AI analysis reveals patterns that mirror some of history's most devastating earthquake sequences. Machine learning algorithms detect stress-loading signatures that preceded major disasters in Japan, Indonesia, and Chile. The same cascading pattern of increasing activity, the same geographic expansion of seismic stress. And history tells us exactly what patterns like this can lead to. August 17, 1976, the Moro Gulf, Philippines. A magnitude 8.1 earthquake struck in the pre-dawn hours, generating a tsunami that killed up to 8,000 people. The parallels to today's crisis are chilling. The same fault system, the same tectonic mechanism, the same vulnerable coastline. But that disaster happened nearly 50 years ago, when coastal populations were a fraction of today's numbers. The 1976 earthquake showed the Philippine Trench's true potential for destruction. The tsunami waves that followed reached heights of over 15 feet in some areas, wiping entire fishing villages off the map. The death toll was catastrophic, but it could have been far worse if the region had been as densely populated as it is today. What makes today's situation more terrifying is the sheer number of people now living in harm's way. The coastlines that were sparsely populated in 1976 are now home to millions of Filipinos. Cities like Davao, General Santos, and Butuan have grown exponentially, placing massive populations directly in the path of any future tsunami generated by a major Philippine Trench rupture. And right now, the same warning signs are flashing. Officially, authorities maintain a posture of cautious monitoring. PHIVOLCS continues to issue measured statements about ongoing aftershock risks and the need for vigilance. But behind the carefully worded public announcements, the response tells a different story. Someone is very worried. 3 more monitoring stations were deployed to the region in the weeks following the October disaster. The Armed Forces of the Philippines has maintained 158 troops in the affected areas, not for reconstruction, but for emergency response readiness. The Philippine Air Force keeps C-130 cargo planes on standby for rapid deployment. These aren't the actions of agencies expecting things to return to normal. International aid organizations remain on high alert. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has personnel on standby for potential escalation. The European Union contributed $750,000 in emergency aid, over 50 million pesos, with additional resources earmarked for rapid deployment if conditions deteriorate. The most telling indicator is what's happening in the scientific community. Research vessels from multiple countries have quietly positioned themselves near the Philippine Trench. Advanced seismic monitoring equipment has been rushed to the region. Tsunami detection buoys are being tested and recalibrated. The global scientific community is watching the Philippine Trench with the intensity usually reserved for active volcanic eruptions. Even the insurance industry is taking notice. Claims from the October earthquake are expected to reach tens of millions of dollars, but insurers are quietly reassessing risk models for the entire region. When insurance companies start recalculating their exposure, it's because they see something in the data that suggests the threat is far from over. But the real question everyone is asking? The range of possibilities stretches from gradual stabilization to absolute catastrophe, and scientists admit they cannot predict which path the Philippine Trench will take. The uncertainty itself is what makes this situation so dangerous. No one can say for certain what comes next. Best case scenario. The aftershock sequence gradually diminishes over the coming months. The fault system releases its accumulated stress through smaller, manageable earthquakes. The region slowly rebuilds, implements stronger building codes, and improves tsunami preparedness. Life returns to something resembling normal, though the psychological scars remain. But the AI analysis suggests a far more troubling possibility. The stress loading from the October doublet may have primed nearby fault segments for catastrophic failure. If that happens, If the Philippine Trench ruptures along a longer section, the results would dwarf anything the region has ever experienced. A magnitude 8.5 to 9.0 earthquake along the Philippine Trench would generate tsunamis reaching heights of 33 to 66 feet. Waves of that magnitude would penetrate miles inland, overwhelming coastal cities and reaching elevations that current evacuation plans never considered. The death toll could reach hundreds of thousands. The economic damage would be measured in the tens of billions of dollars. The most chilling aspect of this scenario is the warning time, or lack thereof. The October earthquake struck without detectable foreshocks. A future megathrust event could happen with equally little advance notice. Coastal communities would have minutes, not hours, to reach safety. Scientists stress that this worst-case scenario isn't inevitable, but the AI analysis shows it's becoming increasingly probable with each passing aftershock, each sign of continued stress along the fault system, and that uncertainty is exactly what makes this so dangerous. As of this recording, the Philippine Trench remains active, unstable, and fundamentally unpredictable. The ground beneath 87,767 displaced people continues to shake with aftershocks that serve as constant reminders that the crisis is far from over. The fault system that generated the October disaster is still adjusting, still releasing energy, still building toward something that could be even worse. The AI models that first detected the increased mega-tsunami risk continue to show troubling patterns. Machine learning algorithms trained on global earthquake data are identifying stress signatures along the Philippine Trench that match conditions before some of history's most devastating disasters. Each new aftershock feeds more data into these systems, and the probability calculations are not improving. Meanwhile, 38,512 people remain crammed into evacuation centers, operating at dangerous overcapacity. Thousands of damaged structures across Mindanao pose ongoing collapse risks with each new tremor. Critical infrastructure, power grids, communication systems, bridges remains vulnerable to failure during the next major earthquake. The international scientific community continues its vigil, but monitoring can only detect threats. It cannot prevent them. The Philippine Trench operates on geological timescales that dwarf human planning cycles. What seems like urgent preparation to human observers might be slow motion to a fault system that has been accumulating stress for decades. Most unsettling of all is the silence from some of the world's leading earthquake experts. When pressed for predictions about the Philippine Trench's future behavior, many simply decline to comment. That professional caution speaks volumes about the uncertainty, but in the potential magnitude of what could be coming. This isn't a question of if another major rupture will occur. In the seismologically active Philippines, it's always a question of when. The Philippine Trench is still building pressure. The AI analysis shows increasing risk, and nearly 88,000 people remain displaced, living in the shadow of a threat that could reshape entire coastlines. Stay alert, stay informed, and keep watching. Because this story is far from over.